Welcome to our wonderful speaker today, Helen Bratt-Wyton from Wightwick Manor. Helen is the House and Collections Manager at Wightwick and in her own words has been there since God was a lad. Is that right, Helen?
I've been with Wightwick for around 22, 23 years now. So a long, long time. So yeah, man and boy.
So that's it, and we're delighted to have you today to talk to us about the house and collection at Wightwick, and as well to tell us a little bit about the exhibition on the Arts and Crafts Garden that I know you have on at the moment, but very, very maddeningly, it's behind closed doors due to the COVID restrictions. So it'd be wonderful to have a little bit of an insight and an introduction to the exhibition as well. So without further ado, thank you very much, and it's over to you.
You want to put the next slide, please? Wightwick. So yeah, so Wightwick Manor and Gardens is on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. If you haven't been, I'm sure lots and lots of you have been to Wightwick. Wightwick was built in 1887 for the Mander family. So Theodore and Flora Mander had Wightwick built. Theodore's a local industrialist. Is part of the Mander paint firm. Many of you may remember that name from years ago. It was one of the leading paint and varnish manufacturers in the country and was a really quite significant international company in its time. A lot of money to be made in paint. And when they brought the Wightwick site, there was already a house there, the old Wightwick Manor, but they didn't want to live in the cold, drafty old manor. They wanted a brand new house built, filled with all the mod cons of the time. Unusually, rather than just commissioning an architect, they actually held a competition and they had 3 architects submit plans, and the architect who was selected was an architect called Edward Ould from a Liverpool firm called Grace and Ould and Son. And if you've ever been to Port Sunlight on the Wirral, I used to call it Liverpool but got told off because it's the other side of the river. But if you ever go to Port Sunlight, you'll notice there's a lot of similarity between parts of Wightwick and some of the cottages at Port Sunlight, and that's because Ould did some of the cottages there. So he was a well-known provincial architect who really worked in what was called the Old English style. So Wightwick is not an arts and crafts house. The exterior of the house, the building of the house itself is very much in this Old English style, very romantic style. As you can see from the photograph, we've got the half timber in, we've got the beautiful barley twist chimneys, we've got tile hanging, we've got a peel tower, all to create this romantic illusion of a house that was built over time. Now, unusually, the Manders didn't get the architect to do the interior scheme. We think Ould probably gave them a bit of advice, but they didn't get the architect to do the interior scheme. A couple of years before, in the spring of 1884, they'd been to a lecture in Wolverhampton by Oscar Wilde on the House Beautiful. Theodore took his notebook along, which we have in our archives, and he wrote loads of notes about how to furnish and decorate a home, really, really under the influence of the House Beautiful lecture. So the house is not an arts and crafts house, it's an aesthetic house, very much built, designed under the influence, like I said, the arts and crafts of the House Beautiful lecture. So if you've been to the House Beautiful lecture and you've got nice deep pockets like the Manders had, there were 2 shops of choice. You either went to Morris & Co on Oxford Street or Liberty's on Regent Street. We know that our family went to both of these shops. Unfortunately, there's very little left of the Liberty interiors because we think that they brought predominantly textiles from Liberty's. Apart from, let me move my computer to this lovely fireplace here. That's right out of the Liberty catalogue. So we do know that they brought some, like I say, Liberty items that are still in the house. So a few of these lovely fireplaces in the less impressive rooms came from Liberty. So Theodore and Flora, like I said, furnished and decorated the home, moved in, had a lovely time there. But unfortunately, both of them died really young. And then next slide, please. Thank you, Sarah. So the house was inherited in 1904 by Theodore and Flora's eldest son, Geoffrey. So Geoffrey joined the family firm, became a paint and varnish manufacturer. He also went into politics and he became Liberal MP for Wolverhampton East from 1929 to 1945. He was a very active MP and he still holds the records for the number of questions asked by a backbench MP. So his main interests as an MP were international relations, and of course that period of time there was a lot going on. He was very anti-fascist, very anti-appeasement, and he spoke out about appeasement so much he actually made it onto Hitler's death list, something the family are very proud of. I remember his daughter coming and showing me the book with the list of dissidents in, and she was very proud to show me that when I just started at Wightwick. So Geoffrey was married twice. Luckily for us, his first wife didn't do a lot to the house. You know, she was moving into a house that was furnished and decorated by her in-laws, but luckily she didn't do a lot. She just decorated a couple of rooms. Not a lot happened within the house during Florence's time in decoration-wise. The next big period of interesting things happened when Geoffrey married his second wife, the biographer and academic Rosalie Glyn Grills. And they decided in 1937 to give the house to the National Trust. Of course, 1937, Wightwick was only 50 years old. You know, nobody was interested in Victorian things at that point. And Geoffrey really had to battle with the trust to get them to take the house on because it was, you know, hideous Victorian rubbish. Nobody was interested in it. But even by then, people were starting to realise that the Morris interiors that hadn't been altered were quite important. So Geoffrey was also a trained barrister. So when the trust kind of said, oh, you know, we're about old things, Geoffrey could actually look at the legislation and say, well, actually, there's nothing in the Country House Bill that says houses have to be old. So the trust were persuaded to take Wightwick on, and Wightwick was actually in the first group of 3 houses taken on under the Country House scheme, and has now spent more of its life being looked after by the trust than it did with the family. But once the house was secure with the trust, Geoffrey and Lady Amanda decided that the house needed an art collection. It hadn't really got much of an art collection. There were a couple of, you know, watercolours of local scenes, a couple of family portraits, and that was it. They decided it needed an art collection. And of course, the ideal thing to acquire was pre-raphaelite art, because they, the pre-raphaelites and Morris were all part of the same group. And the first picture they acquired was this, a lovely Rossetti portrait of Jane Morris. And it's an interesting picture for them to have acquired initially because it's a composite picture. So it was started by Rossetti, but finished off by Ford Madox Brown. And it's Ford Madox Brown that gave Jane the quite strange red hair. Not quite sure why. Jane was a brunette, but she was sometimes painted with red hair. So maybe that's why. And of course, this is 1937. Nobody's interested in this stuff at all. They were initially offered the painting for £17 and 10 shillings, but Geoffrey drove a hard bargain and they paid £14 for her. So, bargain of the century. I mean,
can I just ask you, Helen, do you know if that is quite an unusual artwork in that it was started by one artist and then finished by another one within the pre-Raphaelite circle, or was that something they did regularly?
I don't think it was something they did regularly. I think there was, when Rossetti died, Rossetti was very good at starting things. It was all exciting to start a new painting, but he wasn't very good at getting things finished off. So when he died, he actually left quite a large body of unfinished work. And according to the literature, a lot of his friends finished things off for him so the family could sell them and release the money. So we think that's what happened, because it's a very late Ford Madox Brown, which is why the hair is so poor, because by then he'd had his stroke and was painting with his left hand. So we think that's why, that it was finished off after his death. But one of the interesting things about this painting is not so much the painting itself, it's the connection that the family made. Because when they were going to buy this picture, they wanted to check it was a real Rossetti. So they got in touch with Rossetti's niece, Mrs. Angeli, and they made this connection with the Rossetti family, which is really important to how the art collection developed at Wightwick. And we've ended up having a lot of the Rossetti family pictures here and Ford Madox Brown family pictures from this connection that the family made with the Rossetti descendants. And of course, you know, in the early 1930s, these people were still within living memory. You know, their children, their grandchildren were still alive. You know, some even to the extent of, you know, with Mrs. Sterling, where you've got their sister was still alive. You know, so we created these connections and these networks with the descendants of the pre-Raphaelites, which still bears fruit today for us. And the art collection at Wightwick is very much a collaboration as well with the family and the National Trust. So it's sometimes Geoffrey and Lady Manda brought things and donated it to the house. Sometimes they persuaded the trust to buy things, and sometimes art was brought out of the endowment that the Mandas had given when the trust took the house on, and then Geoffrey would top up the endowment. So it was very much a collaboration between the family and the trust, the art collections that developed here. Lady Manda always said, though, that she wished she'd have brought far more early on when nobody was interested in it and it was as cheap as chips. So, but she was also very good at getting people to give her things or lend her things. You know, she kind of go around the descendants and go, you know, I've got this lovely house, we need to put some art in it. Would you lend me your family collection? So she was very good at persuading people to loan her really quite beautiful things. And of course, also, this is a time when, you know, some of the children of the pre-Raphaelites were getting to a certain age. There wasn't a lot of interest in pre-Raphaelite art, and they were starting to get worried what would happen to their family collections when they passed on, because nobody was interested in it. You know, the major museums weren't interested in these works of art at all. So Lady Manda was very good at mopping all these people up. So next slide. So here we've got an image of the frontispiece to Goblin Market. Initially, when the Mandas started collecting, they actually collected predominantly books for the first few years. They're a very literate family, and we think we've got around 10,000 books in our collection here at Wightwick. So a phenomenal amount of books. Every room in the house has got books in them. So it's not just a few books in the library. They didn't buy books by the yard to fill their library up and make it look full. They're all books that they use. And it's wonderful when we go around cataloguing books, because when we open them, we find little notes in them. We find little... Lady Manda was often sent books to kind of look through and critique. And you find her notes in them, what she thought of them. Sometimes they can be quite acerbic. She didn't mince her words. I think she was quite a scary lady. And yeah, so so we find all these wonderful treasures in a book. And I remember a few years ago, I was looking through a book and a letter dropped out. And when I opened it, it was actually from Benazir Bhutto to Lady Manda, asking her to speak at the Oxford Union. So, you know, it was, they knew everybody, absolutely everybody. So can you put the next slide up, please? So part of the early collection of books that we had was a small but perfectly formed collection of Kelmscott Press books. And Sir Geoffrey acquired those from Sidney Cockerell. They were a gift from Sidney Cockerell. As I was saying, they were getting to know all the people associated with this group who were still alive. So we've got 6 Kelmscott Press books that came from Sidney Cockerell. And then we've also, over the years, collected another 2 Kelmscott Press books. And one of them is the complete works of Geoffrey Chaucer with the lovely Dove's Bindery cover on it, of which there were only 48. So we're really lucky to have one of those. And that was a donation to the collection here at Whitty. We've also got, because not only did the Amandas collect works of art, finished works of art, they were really interested in that design process and how you got to the finished item. So as well as our Kelmscott Press books, we have proof pages of Kelmscott Press items. We've got 2 of Morris's original decorative border designs. We've got a collection of original letter designs, so the beautiful decorative letters. We've got a small collection of some of the original designs for those. So you've got kind of that work in progress. And
just to interrupt you, Helen, the fantastic collection that you have of the De Morgan tracing papers as well.
Aren't they?
Well, just such a special thing to have. So for those of you who don't know, De Morgan would draw and paint his designs onto tracing paper, or his staff would, from his original designs, and then paste them onto tiles. And then the whole thing would go in the kiln and burn. So it's a true wonder that any of these intermediary sort of pieces in the tile making process survived at all. And if anyone was going to have stacks of them, of course it would be Wightwick Manor. So it just goes to show.
And if you want to see them at all, they're all inventories. So if you go onto National Trust Collections online and put in William De Morgan, they should come up and you can see what we've got, which is huge amount of items. But yeah, and we've got sketchbooks, we've got Burne-Jones sketchbooks, we've got Evelyn De Morgan sketchbooks, we've got beautiful collections of preliminary drawings of items, some which are on display, some that aren't, because they really enjoyed that kind of work in progress and how you got to the finished item. So we don't tend to have a lot of the full blousy oils in our collection, because that's not what interested them, even though they were relatively cheap at the time. I mean, when you think in the early 60s, Flaming June sold for £50, you know, they were going for peanuts. But that wasn't really what excited them. They enjoyed these works of art that were the works in progress. They also loved things with connections. So, you know, yes, they got these beautiful Kelmscott Press books, but what would have really interested them was the fact that they acquired them from Sidney Cockerell. So again, it was those connections that were really important to them. So do you want to go on to the next slide, please? So here we've got a little detail from one of our Siddle paintings. We actually have the 2nd largest collection in the world of works by Lizzie Siddle. And but the Mandas, as I was going to say, didn't just acquire works of art from descendants of the pre-raphaelites. They went out and brought on the open market. And one of the first big forays into the open market was in 1961. And Geoffrey and Lady Amanda brought this large collection of Siddle drawings at auction. And Whitwick now has 9 works by Siddle within the collection. And as I said, the 2nd largest collection in the world. The largest collection in the world is at the Ashmolean. They have 2 more than us. Not that we're competitive at all, but we like to think ours are better. As bigger drawings, we do have the 2 watercolours as well. And 2 years ago, we had all of our Siddles framed and we had them out in a lovely exhibition called Beyond Ophelia. So I hope some of you managed to get up and see that. It was only the 2nd ever solo exhibition of Siddle's work. And another connection was made during the purchase of our Siddle drawings. If you'd like to put the next slide up, please. This is a lovely quote from Jeremy Mars, Rupert Mars's father. And he was a pioneering mid-20th century dealer in pre-Raphaelite art. Because really before then, in the 20th century, there wasn't any specialist dealers in pre-Raphaelite art, because people just weren't particularly interested in it. And he was really quite a pioneer in putting pre-Raphaelite art back into the art market and raising its status. And he and Sir Geoffrey were bidding against each other for this little parcel of Siddle drawings. As you can see, an estimate of £5 for them, but they sold £120 to Sir Geoffrey. But what's quite sad is that Geoffrey actually ended up splitting the lot with Jeremy. He was too kind. And if he hadn't have done, we would have the largest collection of Siddles in the world. So the Lady of Shalott went to the Tate and went to the Tate Gallery exhibition. And actually, the Lady of Shalott is still within the Mars collection. And Rupert Mars, who you all know from Antiques Roadshow, he actually said it's one of his favourite pictures within the family collection. He loves it. So I wanted to loan it off him for the Siddle exhibition, but it had been at the Tate again for another exhibition, so he was loath to lend it.
What you need, Helen, is a time machine. Go back and get your hands on all of them.
And there's a really lovely, in the lot, there was a really beautiful pencil drawing of Siddle by Rossetti. And again, that's one that Geoffrey gave to well, obviously must have sold it to him, sold it to Mars, and is now, I believe, in private collection, which is such a shame because it's actually my favourite illustration of Siddle. So it would have been lovely to have that within our collection. So if you want to go on to the next slide. So here we have Lady Manda's quite seminal work, Portrait of Rossetti, which was published in the early 60s. And it's still seen as quite a key work to those studying Rossetti. Because of her connections with Mrs. Angeli, she had access to family papers that no scholar before her had had. And she had this really quite interesting access to the family. And it's a fabulous book. It's no longer in print, but you can quite often pick copies up from Amazon quite cheaply. I paid a couple of pounds for my copy. And it's really readable. It's very lively. It's written in a nice style. So if you're interested in Rossetti in that circle, I do recommend that you pick up Portrait of Rossetti. Lady Manda wrote under both her names, both the maiden name of Rosalie Glingrills and her married name of Manda. She wrote biographies. She did a lovely biography of Mary Shelley as well. And she also did books on cats. She loved her cats. And if you come to Wightwick and look around very carefully, you can spot that there were always cats at Wightwick because you can see some of the cat damage. And normally, when you're allowed to sit down at the moment, obviously with COVID regulations, we can't allow people to sit. But normally, on chairs that you can sit on at Wightwick, we have little cat cushions because the cats were always allowed to sit wherever they wanted. It was people that weren't. So next slide. So. But it wasn't just artworks that the Mandas collected. They brought all kinds of things. They brought more Morris. So they brought the beautiful Morris rugs you see at Wightwick. They brought those during this second phase of collecting. Because even though Theodore and Flora were very well off, the beautiful hand-knotted Hammersmith rugs were way beyond, you know, they're like Russian oligarch type wealth you needed for those. And so they came to us in that second phase of collecting. Again, They were brought at silly fees. I mean, the beautiful rug we have in our dining room, huge Hammersmith rug, paid 5 guineas for, you know, absolutely silly amounts of money. So they brought rugs, they brought more curtains. So some of the beautiful hand woven curtains that we have in the house were brought during the second phase of collecting. They brought Morris & Co stained glass. So we have Charles E. McKemp stained glass in the house, but they brought some Morris & Co stained glass. And they also brought this beautiful embroidery. So this was embroidered by the ladies of the Royal School of Art Needlework for the exhibition in Paris in the early 20th century. And it was made to celebrate the Entente Cordiale between England and France, Britain rather, and France. And it's a copy of Burne-Jones's The Mill. And it's believed to be the largest embroidery remaining in the country that was done by the ladies of the Royal School of Art Needlework. So it's enormous. It's about 12 feet long. Absolutely huge. Stunning. Weighs a ton when we take it down to vacuum it. So it's a 4-person job. So it kind of shows the breadth of the art that the art and the ephemera and the wide-ranging things that they collected. So if you want to do the next slide, please. So our De Morgan collection. So obviously, as you know, we have the De Morgan Foundation at Wightwick, but we also have a collection of De Morgan of our own. And our large collection of Evelyn's came to us over a period of years, again, via pre-raphaelite family connections. So these form part of a series of gifts and purchases from Mrs. Pilkington, née Pickering. So she was Evelyn's not quite adopted niece. So Spencer Pickering, Evelyn's brother, he and his wife were childless, and they not quite adopted the adult daughter of one of their friends. It's all a bit murky, not quite sure what's going on really. And so he and Ethel kind of adopted Phyllis, and the items that we have at Wightwick are from Spencer's collections. And they were from his home at the castle at Wolverhampton, which is now a little family-run hotel that you can go and visit if you want. There doesn't appear to be any of the De Morgan collection remaining there. And in fact, we have tiles at Wightwick in our collection that were from fireplaces at the castle. There is much correspondence in our collection between the Manders and Phyllis. Most of it's not very flattering to Mrs. Sterling, unfortunately. They didn't seem to get on at all. And but I think what's really nice now is that we have the 2 branches of the family's collections here at Wightwick, so they've kind of been brought together nicely, no arguing in the present day. So initially, a lot of Evelyn's work that was destined for Wightwick didn't come here at first. It went to Llanhydrock in Cornwall. That was because Lady Manda claimed we hadn't got room for it, which was code for she didn't really like it very much. But it came to us after Lady Manda's death in 1998, as always had been intended, and now forms really quite a crucial part of our collection. But as part of Mrs. Pilkington's collection, if you want to do the next slide, we haven't just got works by Evelyn de Morgan, we've got works by the wider family as well. So I've got this beautiful unfinished oil by Gertrude Spencer Stanhope of her sister Winifred, and they were cousins of Evelyn, and they came to us via Phyllis. Again, it's these kind of multifaceted family connections that really excited the Manders, and I believe it's these family connections that really differentiates Wightwick's collection from a normal museum type collection, because the connections that the Manders made are almost as important as the art that they have. So next slide, please. So here we've got Rodham Spencer Stanhope, Evelyn's uncle. So we also brought some of his paintings from her, a collection of plates and hollowware as well by William de Morgan. So it's really quite a large gift that we had from Phyllis. We called her Phyllis because she changed her name a lot, so it just makes it easier calling her Phyllis. Then we don't get confused if she's Pilkington or Pickering or whatever name she calls herself in the letter. Because we got quite confused at first. We thought we got donations from 3 people, and actually it turned out to be just Phyllis. She just kept changing her name.
Very much part of the part of the style of these women collectors, because as you've mentioned Mrs. Sterling a couple of times, the founder of the De Morgan collection, Helen, she was Anna Maria Diana Wilhelmina Sterling and used all of those different names sort of whenever she fancied. So yeah, we have the same problem. Keeps us on our toes.
It does. And my colleague Andrea, who's house steward at Wightwick, she's kind of really taken over doing research into Phyllis and the collection, and she's about the only person that can read Phyllis's handwriting as well. So it's quite a gift trying to get to read her letters, because her handwriting is slightly appalling. And
yes, I would second that. It's dreadful.
So Andrea's become kind of keeper of the letters, as I said, she's the only one that can read them. So if you want to go on to the next slide, we've got a nice photograph of the gallery here. So this is our latest exhibition in the gallery, our De Morgan Gallery. So what's quite interesting is kind of how De Morgan came to be at Wightwick. So when we heard that you were losing your gallery in Wandsworth, we decided it would be nice to offer you a temporary home here at Wightwick. We'd already started using the Malthouse for little exhibitions, but we felt this was a really good excuse to fit the Malthouse out as a proper gallery and use it as a proper exhibition space. And luckily, De Morgan Foundation were happy to come to Wightwick. There was lots of negotiations, and you moved here to be with us. So we're one of your 3 partnerships, which is so exciting, and we love having the collection here. And it's just working so well with us, and it's just so lovely to see how this partnership is developing between the Trust and De Morgan. And a really good illustration of that is this new exhibition that we opened last September, which was curated by Hannah Squire, who is a National Trust curator working with Sarah, and they curated this absolutely beautiful exhibition called Beneath the Lustre, which is going down very well with our visitors. And while we were doing research into our links with Wilhelmina Sterling, when we were looking to bring De Morgan here to Wightwick, what was fascinating was we actually found a letter from Sir Geoffrey to Mrs. Sterling offering her a home for the collection during the Second World War. And we thought, isn't that lovely that in times of need, this is the second time that Wightwick has offered a safe haven for De Morgan. And we thought that was just such a lovely connection and kind of made it meant to be. So Sarah, can you do my next slide, please? So this again is the latest exhibition. So here you can see some of the beautiful De Morgan tiles. And we really wanted in this second exhibition to put more tiles into it, because from visitor feedback, we got lots of plates and hollowware of De Morgan, but very few tiles on display, and visitors wanted to have more tiles. So that kind of spurred Sarah and I into thinking, and we've actually put a project together there's another little storage space in the Malthouse building, and we were hoping to do it this year. We got the funding to do it this year, but obviously there's global pandemic got in the way. But we're hoping maybe next year or the year after to do a tile library. So have a whole room just full, floor to ceiling, of De Morgan tiles. So that's going to be our next project, hopefully in the next year or two, depending on what happens. But it's a very exciting project and we're really looking forward to it. So next slide, please. So we promised to talk about our latest exhibition in the house, The Art of the Arts and Crafts Garden. So it opened in March and was open for 3 whole days before total lockdown, and we closed. Unfortunately, it's still closed because it's in an upstairs room and the rooms are quite small upstairs and we can't guarantee the social distancing. So at the moment, the house is only open ground floor only. So what we've decided is we're putting back the exhibition till next year, and hopefully when we can open upstairs, the exhibition will run for the whole of next year. We're also hoping as well, because during lockdown, nature and gardens and outside spaces became really important to people. And we're hoping to capture some of that, you know, about how these beautiful outdoor spaces and beautiful gardens have been such a help to people's mental health during this period. So we're hoping to capture some of that and put that in the exhibition. So the idea behind the exhibition was this year is 100 years since the death of Alfred Parsons, who was the first person we believe to start to lay out the garden at Wightwick. And we thought, oh, it's a really good excuse to kind of big up our beautiful arts and crafts garden. So we might not have an arts and crafts house, but we have a real pucker arts and crafts garden. So next slide, please. So we started doing some research into the garden, and all I can say is never do any research into something you think you know, because you find out what you know is complete rubbish, and which is what we found out about how the garden was designed at Wightwick. So in the past, we thought that Parsons was responsible for Wightwick's formal garden, but recently discovered photographic evidence that came to light during the research process for this exhibition shows that this area was already there in the 1890s and had been created earlier than Parsons came to Wightwick. But what we did find was some lovely letters, and as you can see here, these lovely quotes. My favourite one is the main one here, where it says that Theodore was obviously very concerned about how much his new garden was going to cost him. And that obviously his anxiety about money must mean that he's very rich. So, next slide, please. So Parsons did quite a lot, we think, but we don't know exactly how much he did. But all of it came to an end in 1900 when Theodore died suddenly. So Theodore died aged only 47 in 1900. So everything kind of came to a stop for a few years. All work seemed to have ceased, and our records of this period are really scarce. So we're not really sure what took place until 1904, when Flora, Theodore's wife and widow, instructed a new garden designer, Thomas Mawson. So Thomas Mawson was a very well-known garden landscape architect designer, and he'd done lots of civil landscape schemes and was a very well-known garden designer of the period, very much in the arts and crafts style. He did this beautiful book, of which we have a copy in our collection, The Art and Craft of Garden Making, which is beautifully illustrated with wonderful drawings. So Mawson was a huge admirer of Ruskin's philosophy and worked to achieve a balance between nature and artifice, and advocated a style that allowed for formality closer to the house, with increasing formality and naturalistic planting further away. Luckily, we've got loads of notes. We've got Theodore's notebook, we've got Geoffrey's planting notebook, to really show how interested they were in garden design and in plants. Particularly roses. All the Manders seem to love roses, so we have quite a lot of roses in our garden. With the Whittick garden built on the side of a hill, the garden here really makes use of that layering of the site and the views across into deepest, darkest Shropshire, which are protected views. So we're always saying no to planning applications within our views to try and keep those beautiful views. And this lovely quote by Mawson here: "A successful garden must respond to and satisfy man's longing for the beautiful." So next slide. So here we have some of the pictures within the exhibition. So we've called the exhibition The Art of the Arts and Crafts Garden, because we really feel that art was so important in disseminating arts and crafts garden ideals. So we've got the top left, we've got the beautiful Marie Spartali Stillman watercolour of Kelmscott Manor's garden. And then in the bottom centre, you've got a May Morris illustration of Kelmscott Garden as well. We've got one of Parsons' beautiful watercolours on the right at the bottom of one of the lakes in the Lake District. And we've got a Ruskin sketch of the Lake District as well. But books, illustrations, paintings were really important in disseminating those arts and crafts ideals of garden design. And I always think, whenever you think of the ideal garden, that garden of your imagination, it's always an arts and crafts garden that you're thinking of. You know, it really kind of, you know, if you look at children's literature in the late 19th century, all the images of gardens are always arts and crafts gardens. You've got your hollyhocks and your beautiful naturalistic planting, which was so new and so different. And I've also put on this slide these lovely photographs of Flora Mander. And that was one of the lovely things about the research that came out of this exhibition, was it kind of brought Flora to life, because it was always Flora, Theodore's wife, and Theodore built and decorated Whittick, and Flora was this kind of very kind of vague figure in the background. But understanding how important Flora was in the garden designing, and it's her that, you know, commissioned Mawson to do the scheme, was kind of really quite important to us, kind of bringing her out of the shadows and teasing out her influence.
Such a brilliant name to be head of the garden design.
Flora.
Very poetic.
Yeah. We've got a gorgeous portrait of her just surrounded by beautiful planting, which is lovely. So next slide, please. So there we go. So nice photograph here of Whittick in its autumn splendour. So this is how we kind of look at the moment. So this is kind of the end of the talk, but I thought I'd leave plenty of time for discussion and questions. So please fire away.
Thank you so much, Helen. That was brilliant. What a lovely way to round off talks of the house, which I hope, you know, with the garden and with celebrating that as well. And like you said, with that being the first part of the house that was able to reopen, it's so nice to actually think about that and consider that a little bit more, because I know so much work goes into it, as well as it does in the house, and we maybe don't kind of think about that so much on our visits. But there is a team, isn't there, at Whittick that look after and sort of work in this arts and crafts style and maintain the gardens today?
Oh yes, we've got a fabulous head gardener, Kat. She's so talented and she's really bringing the garden back to life. And as you say, you know, the garden was the first part of Whittick to reopen, and we did a one-way route round to keep people safe, so people weren't, you know, crossing on paths and things like that. And what was really lovely was people got to see bits of the garden that they'd never visited before. So we had regular visitors that say, I've seen bits of the garden I've never been to. So that was rather lovely. And, you know, it was in a lot of ways, you know, I was very lucky during lockdown because I live on site. I live here at Whitty. Oh, what a nice address. And this was my garden. So when I was going out for my walk every day, I was walking around this beautiful garden, and most of the time I got it all to myself. And it was really quite a magical time in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. So if you know, Helen, do you know which parts of the garden Parsons designed and which parts Mawson designed? It's a question from Caroline.
We thought Parson had designed the formal garden, which is opposite the front door of the house. But as I said in the talk, it looks like that was there before. So we think he may have done some of the pergolas that are in the formal garden. And there used to be some rose arbours in what is now the little woodland garden, the bridge garden. But unfortunately, they all fell into disrepair and fell down during the war. And it's just like a little woodland garden there now. So no, we don't really know. Say we thought we knew. It's the trouble with research. You actually find out that you knew less than you thought you did.
And always end up with more questions than answers as well.
But we think actually it's far more a Mawson garden than ever it was a Parsons garden.